Everybody, thanks for joining us for our June 17th Committee of the Whole meeting. I'd like to start by respectfully acknowledging that the gathering on the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. And we do have a late item that has come forward, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Moore. Oh, is it not passing? Nope.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask Council to consider the late item for the DCBIA road closure funding request.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed, and motion carries. And then here is the late item. Pass it back to you. Did you want to speak to it, Mr. Garvey? I'll pass it back to you, Councillor Warren.
Yeah, so I'll move that the Committee of the Whole provide up to $7,000 from the Other Council Initiatives Gaming Fund for road closure costs associated with the June 27th, 2026 Downtown Courtenay Anniversary Party and VW Bug Jam Show and Shine event.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Again, this is in support of our Downtown Business Association. There's several businesses that are also having significant anniversaries. And so this is really a great event to celebrate our downtown core, and comes as a recommendation from the Downtown Business Association. Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for putting this motion on the agenda tonight, Councillor Morin. I'm just wondering what is the total support for these road closures for other events? I'm just trying to get a sense of how often we do this and what it represents in terms of just additional costs to the city.
Thanks so much for the question. It is something we've been talking about in regards to this, but I'll pass it over to Mr. Garvey.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor McCollum. Just would first say Mr. Langemeyer and Mr. Shaw, who are involved in these things, just this wasn't a topic for the Committee of the Whole, so they weren't available. I believe there's 5 or 6 downtown road closures. I can get back to council on the specific costs. We have accommodated within our operational budgets the usual road closures, Santa Claus Parade, market days, it's the Moonlight and Magic Converse. So there's a series of them that have come, and it's becoming more regularized. This is a unplanned event, and that's why we came to council, because we don't have additional budget at this point to cover it. But I agree that what the total is, we can report back to council on that, but the estimated contracting cost is in the area of $7,000. So the overall costs, which are included in our operational budget, would be in that area. The scales, distances, all that components of downtown Fifth, it does vary because sometimes it's entire Fifth and the like. So, but I will get back to council on those cumulative costs.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like a fairly, I don't know, large ask for a last minute request. I think if it was any other group in the community that, came, if we had a delegation here tonight asking for this in a short order with no real other information around what's being contributed in terms of their organization or sponsors, I think we would probably take issue with it. And it seems as though, maybe we're considering this in a different way because of our relationship with the DCBIA, which is different than maybe other community groups. But yeah, I do have concerns about getting a last minute request for a cost like this, because this is basically funds that won't be available for other groups doing other things in the community that are maybe more aligned with what our strategic priorities are than this particular event. So I do have some concerns around this.
Right, thanks for those comments. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Gillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Appreciate Councillor McCollum's concerns. I'm wondering, my sense is that the DCBIA didn't actually request $7,000, but that's the staff estimate of what it will cost us to provide for the event, which looks like it's in benefit to our downtown. I think they've acknowledged that it was a late request, and I wonder if I'm assuming that we do still have these funds available in the council contingency budget, and I don't know that there are any other major commitments that are planned for those funds at the current time. So on that basis, I'll support this. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Helene. And Mr. Garber, do you want to speak to? Yeah, I mean, my last conversation with Mr. Langenmeyer was that there were funds available, and I don't think it was flagged that this was going to deplete them. But Mr. Garber.
There wasn't a specific question about that, but $10,000 of the $75,000 has been spent year to date. And I'm not aware of other requests at this point, but this is the purpose of council's designation of these monies from the gaming non-taxable money to respond to requests.
All right, especially emergent ones. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Sorry, I might have missed that. What is the remaining total in that?
About 65,000. So
65.
of the 75,
Of
only
75.
10,000 has been committed so far.
Yeah, I mean, I share similar concerns. I shared this with the city manager when I became aware of the requests. And my understanding is that our staff work quite closely with the DCBIA to support their events as well as other initiatives downtown. I guess my only request going forward is that if this is planned to be an ongoing annual event, that it's added to the list so that our staff can work closely and that we can include it in our annual budgetary cycle as a in-kind support, which is a cost, of course, to the taxpayer because of the time for our staff to do this work. And the last piece, I guess, my question to the city manager, I know that we're going to be considering the annual report in coming weeks. This, I would assume, would be in addition to that financial amount that we have calculated that we know council has put towards supporting downtown across all initiatives. This obviously wouldn't make it in time for that annual report, but maybe we could just make a note, and I'm happy to speak to it, that it is another dollar amount that we've gone over and above what we've committed to for the downtown. Thanks.
Thanks for that. And Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, similar thinking on this is that, yeah, I think there's maybe a bit of a gap in information just in terms of, you know, and Councillor Hilliam pointed this out, that the request has been for support with the road closure, which of course, you know, putting an event together, that's a requirement. And I think there could be a perception that this doesn't have much of a financial cost to the city when in fact it does. So we have now a motion on the screen that has a monetary amount attached to it that of course wasn't in the request from the DCBIA. And it does make me wonder if there is a little bit of a lack of clarity that we could maybe address going forward, just exactly what the financial commitments are of the city when we provide these road closures. And, you know, a short list of them was provided, and, you know, there's no concern there. But I think it is important for transparency and also communication with the DCBIA that these are costs to the city that are in turn, you know, provided by the community, whether we, you know, use gaming funds or taxation. It still is a cost to the city to do this. And, you know, the last minute aspect of this and maybe the lack of recognition that this is going to come out of funds that could be put to other things is, you know, I do have a concern with that. So I'm not sure what I would suggest going forward, but perhaps there does need to be some communication at the DCBIA meeting around, you know, maybe an agreed upon number of closures with some clarity on exactly what that means in terms of financial impact instead of having these one-off requests. And I mean, it is hard to say no to them. This is clearly underway, being planned. We don't want to say no to something like this, but at the same time, you know, funds are finite, and yeah, it is drawing down funds that we have for other initiatives. And if it was any other group coming at the last minute, I think the answer would be different than what we're looking at today. So just want to make those comments. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum, and totally agree. I think one of the challenges that the BIA got themselves into, so to speak, is the fact they had no levy or requisition increase for decades, which got them into a hole. And so I think that's where the reliance on the city came. Now that they're actually increasing that, potentially increasing their boundaries, there is some definitely a potential going into the future that they can work like other BIAs where they pay for the events themselves. But I'll pass it over to Ms. Saunders.
Thank you, through the Mayor to Council. I just thought I'd offer some additional information on the work that our Culture and Events Coordinator is doing. So while not in place yet for this type of ask, part of the work that's currently underway is capturing all the current events in an annual calendar and capturing the in-kind commitments for all of those events. So that inventory will go into our special event hosting policy that we will be developing to be able to provide the kind of information that Councillor McCollum you're looking for, the commitments, the event calendar, and getting direction through that policy work from council on the type of and level of in-kind support, depending on event type or who's hosting. So that is all planned as part of our special event hosting policy work that is coming, but that's a 2027 initiative.
Excellent. So unfortunately, none of it for today, but I'll call the question regardless. Oh, Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I brought this forward on behalf of the mayor because usually the mayor doesn't propose motions. So I sort of have similar feelings around this. And I think in addition to what Ms. Saunders is saying, it may be a good idea, and I don't know if it's probably not included in this action today, but to have that conversation out to the BIA membership, not just to the executive, in terms of the financial support that we do provide, because I think it's a bit blurry. I don't think people know the extent of the financial, and I mean, in kind, yeah, it's in kind, but it's also involving paying staff. And this is something that's has to be organized very quickly. We're in the summer, there's scheduling issues with staff and a multitude of other complexities that we would be accommodating with this request. And I think that maybe we could make a request to the BIA executive to communicate out those costs, those contributions that the city is making. So maybe that could be something, on a future agenda when the mayor meets with the BIA. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that. And I have absolutely no problem with that, getting that clarity from our side so we can communicate it to them and then having them communicate it out to their membership. Because I think the point here is this is something that's been ongoing again for decades without a real accounting of what the value is. So I think that definitely is something that is really useful when we're talking to our BIA members around the support they do get us from council and the city in general. Appreciate the discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. Moving on to a regular scheduled program here, 2.1, the committee restructure. We have the Adriana Proton who will go walk us through this.
Thanks. I'm going to have a hard time referring to all of you as committee of the whole. So if I say council, please forgive me. We asked that there be a committee of the whole meeting to discuss more in detail some of the committee policy questions that are coming up. So we do have council direction on committees, and we have two council strategic priorities. The strategic priorities are that council wanted to review operations in terms of reference for city committees, and also directed that staff and council review city financial processes, including the terms of reference for the Finance Select Committee. And then in response to an earlier report, council had directed to schedule this committee of the whole meeting to discuss council's priorities for committees, committee format and operations, committee communications, committee budgets, committee administration, and external committees. As a bit of a refresh, what are committees for? In theory, committees are to advance your priorities, to provide insight on a topic. For public engagement, there's lots of other benefits like the committee of the whole. They can provide space for discussing topics in depth. And commissions, which we technically do have 2 of, they can actually operate services and enforcement or manage property and licenses on your behalf. And I put this graphic here because you can see the official community plan, you can see the council strategic priorities and department business plan. And I think the goal often is for committees to exist somewhere within this circle and not be located too far outside of that. So in theory, if you have committees, they are helping to advance the work of the city in some way, whether it's actually work on a strategic priority or by contributing to a department, something like that, that moves this work forward. So diving right in, the first topic on this agenda is the committee policy that you have. The existing policy that discusses committees generally, internal committees, is from 1998. So it's almost 30 years old, and it's mainly been superseded by the procedure bylaw. There's lots of topics that are not discussed in there, like there's no guidance for committee recruitment. We also have a committee of the whole bylaw, which governs what you're doing today. And you might notice that you do have unusual powers. So you were able to make that motion earlier to provide money to an event because you have this committee of the whole bylaw. So it's up to council if you want to retain that those powers. I think there used to be a different function for the committee of the whole where it was meeting more often. We're not using those powers as often, so you can decide whether you want that bylaw to be updated. The other bylaw we're bringing forward is the Board of Variance bylaw, which is also a very old bylaw. We think that the terms of reference for committees can be separate from the committee policy. They can include the really committee specific information, but we want the committee policy, that foundational policy, to have information that applies to all committees and guides how staff do that work and guides committees more generally. So we have a couple of recommendations here. And I would suggest maybe we stop at each section and discuss each part, and then it's up to council. A couple of things. You can make recommendations to council, or because you have this committee of the whole bylaw that gives you the power to do so, you can also just make those motions tonight. It's up to you. So you can make a motion to council recommending that council do something, or the committee of the whole can make the motion. So these are the 2 motions that we're recommending for this portion of the meeting.
All right. Councillor Jolicoeur, and maybe I'll just put some context in. When I first got on council, we had committee of the whole, I believe, once a month-ish, sometimes a little bit more. Councillor Hillian can nod if I'm right or wrong. But it did seem that a lot, like there's a blurry line. So we kind of moved to just mainly council meetings after I became mayor. So the committee of the wholes have been used significantly less than prior to, but that's just sort of historical context. I'll pass it over to Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for pulling us together to talk about committees because it was on our strat plan. We're finally getting around to it. So thanks for all the work to date. And I, similarly to the mayor, we haven't done a lot of these committees of the whole. And in reviewing other municipalities, it's quite a range of use of committee of the whole. And then reading the bylaw 2271 from, looks like, from a while ago as well, 2003. And your staff report lays out, basically, we have the same powers as a council meeting except for A through G. And you also listed here. So I'm wondering if you can kind of explain what is best practice the intent here is that you're requesting that we consider repealing the bylaw and then move towards policies. I didn't see anything about creating a new bylaw. And so maybe if you can expand further your rationale and what the impact would be of removing a bylaw that would allow us another avenue for decision making except for these 7 items. That's my first question.
Sure. So I can maybe provide a little bit of information about how committee of the whole meetings are often used elsewhere. They're usually used to discuss items more in depth. And my sense is that not actually passing resolutions at the committee of the whole meeting does provide a sense of freedom in that you're there to discuss something and make a recommendation to council, and you have space to do so. The other thing that is good about the committee of the whole not necessarily making the decisions right there is that members of the public understand that if they want to witness the decision making or just be at the meeting where something is happening and being decided, they can go to a council meeting. And if they really want to understand the topic and understand the deliberation that might take longer, they would go to the committee of the whole meeting. So I think it provides more clarity as to which meeting you should go to if you want the decision making.
Okay, is it subsequent or should I go on to Councillor Hillian? Okay, Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I think that to a certain extent, the committee of the whole process has been taken over by lunch and learns. I think back when committee of the whole was a regular feature of council meetings, there weren't as many. Lunch and learns were a pretty rare type of a thing. And I think what's happened is that the expectation that council members would attend special topics to get a more in-depth briefing on something that was planned where decisions wouldn't necessarily be made, but information would be shared. That has grown over the years in my experience. And because that basically was the purpose of a committee of the whole, to have one particular topic that people could get into an in-depth discussion on. So, I mean, I don't see any problem with the recommendation that's being proposed. There could still be a committee of the whole, but it would just be by matter of policy rather than by bylaw. I might point out also that back in those days, council met every week. And as the administrative burden and the legislative burden has increased, we've modified that process to make it a lot easier for staff, not as onerous in terms of having to prepare every week to have a public council meeting, which could last anywhere from half an hour to 4 hours. But of course, the problem we have now is that our council meetings tend to go into the wee hours, and as they don't happen as often. Anyway, just some comments. Thanks.
Yeah, appreciate some of that context. Councillor Zerlicher, I'm going to meander on here to Councillor McCollum and then Councillor Moore, and then.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great that we're going through this process and, cleaning up what is some pretty old policies and bylaws. My thoughts on the committee of the whole, in like generally speaking, is I like the way that we're using it now. I think that's what we consider the budget discussions are committee of the whole currently. And for a discussion like we're having tonight, it kind of makes it clear that it's not the typical format of a council meeting. But my one, maybe contradictory thought on this is that I do like that it has the delegated authority to make a decision, because I think it makes more sense from the public's point of view if they're watching a deliberation that it ends in a decision. And you have to be a pretty high level of informed in council processes to understand why we would have a meeting and discuss something and then have it go back to the next meeting to actually you know, make the motion, that I just think like in terms of process, that it is a little easier to follow when we have a decision and then, or we have a discussion and then that leads to a decision at the same time. I also think if other people are, you know, attending a meeting after the fact and we're not following the committee of the whole, it could be fairly confusing to see a major piece of policy voted on with no discussion at a subsequent meeting, just in terms of like, yeah, how the public understands our processes. So I like the way that we have that flexibility currently. And I don't see, yeah, any kind of major challenges in my time in council and having that, especially because we record the meetings and they're provided in the same way as a council meeting. So that's kind of my 2 cents on the committee of the whole thing. So I would prefer that we keep that authority if possible, but I mean, it's also not a hill I would die on. Thanks.
Thanks for the comments, and I'll go to Councillor Moran.
Great, thank you, Mayor. This brings up a couple questions just around the governance piece. Councillor Hillian brought up lunch and learns. Lunch and learns are not open to the public, and there's no attendance requirement. Although it's really great if council members do attend those, because sometimes those questions come up later, and it's good to be informed. So I guess my question is, committee of the whole, do they have the same attendance requirement that if elected officials miss are those included in regular meetings? So so there's more of that, I guess, accountability for council to attend those. And I guess just in terms of the lunch and learns, you know, should some of those actually turn into committee of the whole meetings? Because there could be a perception that if there's a bunch of lunch and learns that the public doesn't have access to, and then we discuss, you know, something in a meeting, we have this information that maybe hasn't been made public. So those are a couple of things that I'm kind of wondering about, you know, the attendance requirement, as well as the you know, lunch and learns and not being open to the public.
So the attendance requirement in the community charter refers to 4 regularly scheduled council meetings. So I don't believe the committee of the whole, as long as it's a committee of the whole meeting, would fall under that. It wouldn't suddenly be like, okay, now you basically only have a month and a half where you could not attend council meetings. I imagine council would still want to attend. The other question was about whether lunch and learn should be committee of the whole meetings. And I think the committee of the whole often offers more flexibility in that if you decide to ask a question, if council decides to do something that would move business forward, that is legal to do if it's in a committee of the whole meeting, but you can't do it in a lunch and learn. So a lunch and learn is a format where council is supposed to just be taking in information and not do anything that can move the business of council forward. So it does feel a little bit tricky there, in that council needs to be very careful about what is happening in that venue.
And Mr. Garbett.
Yeah, thank you. I want to reiterate, as we're in a public meeting, that we purposefully structure our lunch and learns as an information opportunity whereby there are never any decisions made. Sometimes we engage in incredibly complex projects, and I believe they're very typically one topic. And so, you know, we could be talking about those things, but they are consciously structured so as to comply with the legislation. When I arrived as a city manager, it was a newer concept to me. And I think the feedback from council and the ability to really understand some items is good. So we've used them at appropriate times at information sharing things as opposed to any kind of direction. So thanks.
Thanks for that. Back to Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks. Just on that, just a comment on the lunch and learns. I found them to be foundational in providing the in-depth technical understanding for some significant projects that we had in this term. So I would say that I very much appreciated the more informal learning opportunity around projects and frameworks and big things that the council was trying to move forward. So I was very much appreciative of the lunch and learns. I do have a question of around the committee of the whole. I have two more questions, but one related likely to the procedural bylaw. Now we have, per the procedural bylaw, maybe also the charter, a restriction in terms of how quickly we can call a council meeting. Is there any language either in our procedural bylaw or in the charter that restricts us to be able to, like, are we able to call a committee of the whole quicker than we would be able to call a council meeting? And the reason again I'm asking is because similar to Councilor McCollum, I am actually appreciate the delegated authority through the existing bylaw that allows us to make decisions, because it's another avenue for decision-making process that, at least on surface, because we haven't had that much exposure to it, would allow some flexibility. But again, maybe the same time frame application applies to community hall, but maybe to the clerk.
Yeah, the time frame would be very similar, because we still need to inform all members of council and put together an agenda, things like that. So I don't think we would be able to have a committee of the whole meeting called any quicker than a council meeting.
Okay. And my last question is, because the policies are not being deliberated today, they're to be developed. And so if we were to move forward with repealing the existing bylaw, that would in fact remove all of our delegated authorities that we currently have under the existing committee of the whole bylaw.
Mhm.
And then policy, like are policies able to give us authorities to make any decisions?
No, the recommendation there, which of course council can decide what you want to do with your committee of the whole, but the recommendation would take away your delegated authority. So it would make the committee of the whole a committee that cannot make decisions, that must recommend them to council, which would be like other council committees.
Okay, that's helpful. I think I'm leaning towards maintaining the level of delegation we have in the existing bylaw. But I'm also, I guess, if I can, Mayor, one more question. Are there other components of the existing bylaw that you would recommend us to review? Because it seems like from the staff report, the majority of the commentary is around simply repealing it as a result of what has been shared around transparency and the perception of the public. So are there other components of the bylaw that are due to be reviewed?
I could take another look at it, but my recollection is that it was primarily the unusual delegated authority in the bylaw.
And maybe as a follow-up to that, because it sounds like it's those unusual powers that are delegated that is sort of the area of concern here. And I'm just wondering, is there, other than the questions around transparency, is there something that creates conflict or any challenges with local government act or the community charter?
No, I don't think there are any issues with the legislation. I think we have treated committee of the whole meetings as different than council meetings in recent years. But my understanding of what occurred before that is it was a little bit more fluid as to what would go to a committee of the whole meeting versus a council meeting. So if council keeps the bylaw, we would continue, and we could certainly have policies regarding the committee of the whole, but we would continue to try to keep them separate, to keep committee of the whole items in a committee of the whole meeting and council items in a council meeting.
Right. But then, as an example from tonight's meeting, if something was emergent and needed to be dealt with quickly, there would be policy, but council could still go against that policy based on a majority vote or unanimous vote or something, whatever the policies would state.
Yeah, that's correct. And if you did repeal the bylaw, you would not be able to do that because you just wouldn't have the delegated authority to do it.
So we lose some flexibility. Okay. So we might be able to, from a policy perspective, create a framework that does what we're asking for, but still on those emergent issues. And I guess on the emergent issues, And again, I don't have it at the tip of my tongue, but if we had to call an emergency meeting, I'm trying to recall if you have a unanimous vote, how quickly you can do that. And I don't know if you've got that.
You can do it upon a moment's notice if you have unanimous agreement from council. Like if there is an emergency and we wanted to meet as soon as possible, it would just be how quickly we could get everybody in a room or online.
And then the reason for that emergent meeting, we'd have to be clear and transparent about that. So if we did repeal it and we went to a committee of the whole that didn't have delegated authorities, but we need to do an emergent issue, I'm getting into the weeds here, but we could actually call an emergency. Yeah, so.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Yep, just seeing what the options are, but I mean, I think it's great getting this clarity on exactly how these things work, because I think again, there are a lot of reliances on staff and how they want it to work as well, and how it could be most effective. So that being said, I'm going to look back to Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, just one more question on this. So is the primary concern just that the way that this delegated authority aspect exists in the city of Courtenay is the main concern, just that it's out of step with the typical practice of other municipalities, that it doesn't really align with what how things are typically done elsewhere? Or is there another concern that we just haven't necessarily highlighted around why that's a little bit messy in terms of processes?
The messy part comes if it's not clear on what is a committee of the whole thing and what is a council thing, where you could maybe go to a committee of the whole thing and meeting and you're doing the same types of items as at a council meeting. So if we can clarify that with policy, then, and I have had another look at the bylaw, there are a couple of outdated references to legislation, but the bylaw itself, like what is in the bylaw, doesn't need tweaking if you want to keep those delegated authorities. So it's really just about the clarity between what is handled at each meeting. The delegated authorities makes it possible for the committee of the whole to do a lot of things that a committee of the whole would not normally do.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the flexibility. I mean, tonight's meeting is a case in point, I suppose, that if we're all gathering and there is city business that needs to be addressed immediately, then it does tighten things up a little bit. Yeah, my thought is that if we can address the clarity and, that we have policy in place that makes it very clear what the purpose of committee of the whole is. I think you're 100% correct. That was my recollection when I got on council, is it was hard to tell what that, we'd have 2 council meetings and then the last Wednesday of the month was committee of the whole, and it didn't seem like we were doing anything differently than the other 2 meetings. And I had wondered why we called it something else. So, I think we did experience exactly that situation where it wasn't clear, and we are kind of blending the two. So I think it is a useful practice to get really clear on why we have 2 different kinds of meetings and use them appropriately. But I think leaving that flexibility in place could prove useful in the future. So that's my thoughts on it.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum, and Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks so much for all this work, Adriana. I think I am, and as Councillor McCollum said tonight is an example, appreciating the flexibility this allows us. And I'm not sure that I'm seeing the potential reasons for making this change to me outweigh that. I think we've been using this policy in recent years really well, and it's very different than what we initially had. I think it's quite easy to explain how and why we do the things we do, but having that additional degree of flexibility to respond quickly as we had to today, to make sure we can make the best decisions for the community. I think I don't see enough reasoning at this point for me to want to lose that degree of kind of nimble response.
Thanks for that. And Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. I'm sensing a approaching closure to this conversation. I just wanted to share with council my experience over my career with committees of the whole is often they are similar to council meetings, but very focused sometimes, whereas in a council meeting, you might have 9 or 10 or 12 or 13 items to walk through. And my experience over time is that in the committee of whole, then you could be kind of a focus meeting about one topic where you could consider some items in a meaty way. Because it's often, as there's been a discussion about changing that, calling special meetings, et cetera. So that's my history using this. And when council gave us direction, we talked about strategic priorities around the committees, we have some committees as well as we have the committee of the whole. So I just offer that the tool itself with the ability to make decisions in certain areas, as opposed to bylaws, there's some history and differences between that. But my experience, why you would have a committee of whole is to have a very focused meeting, potentially around a topic to facilitate discussion. You don't have to balance that knowing that you have, 20 items to get through in a meeting. So I offer that, but I think it's sounding like council is moving towards a direction.
Thanks for that. And maybe from a housekeeping perspective, given where this conversation is going, there's still an opportunity maybe to clean up the bylaw. Like you said, there may be some outdated terminology or references in there. So I don't know if that's something that we want to contemplate if we move towards a policy thing, but also do that. But I'll pass it over to Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, my question was along the same lines, that if we go with the recommendation on the screen, but just change repealing the bylaw to updating or reviewing the bylaw, as opposed to repealing and then leaving the rest of the resolution as it is, would that be adequate direction from council to proceed based on kind of what the commentary has been tonight?
You could go a number of ways. It would be fine to make the resolution, but change that to review the committee of the whole delegation bylaw, something like that. Or you could just not make that portion and we'll leave the bylaw as is. The late item today certainly doesn't make my case for
Yeah, funny timing. But I mean, but also to the point, I mean, I think it's great that we can have a thorough discussion around this and then make the resolution and provide the direction, and we don't have to go through that procedural process of making this at a future meeting, because I think it is confusing for the public. We have that system at the regional district because of how the committees work, and I don't think it's very clear to the public when they're tuning in sporadically what is going on there. So to me, if we can have less of that, that's a bonus. So okay, I'll let I won't make the motion because I'll let you go.
Fantastic. Councillor Hamilton.
Happy to take a crack at that. So the council directs staff to update the committee of the whole delegation bylaw to ensure all references are current. And is there another word I should use, Adriana? Current. Review is sufficient. You don't like just it doesn't even need that. Okay, well then what she said.
Great crack. All right, I'm getting nods and smiles, so that's great to see.
Did I get a seconder?
She said her own.
I was just going to say, through the mayor, that the staff report speaks to policy development, and we've mentioned that policy could help to frame and clarify. And so given that that's likely not on our staff work plan, would that be helpful to just have to develop clarifying policies to support?
Well, in the other resolution on the screen, we had suggested adding committee of the whole policies to foundational
Oh, there we
committee policy.
Okay.
So I would maintain that there. We can, yeah.
Use that as the funnel to make it happen. So we got a motion that's been moved and seconded. I think there's been good discussion. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries.
There's a second
And there's the
motion on the screen.
second that.
Yes. Yeah.
It looked like it was one, because it doesn't say 1 and 2.
Okay, if you're great.
Yeah,
Okay.
I took it as the whole screen. Everybody else? Counselor, or sorry.
Yeah,
Mr.
sorry,
Garvey.
just to provide some clarity, what I heard, that we were gonna walk through the staff report recommendations. So the first recommendation was, has been revised regarding the committee of the whole delegation, and I believe it was voted on.
Yep,
Thank you,
the first step.
officer. Yeah, and then I think, Adriana, you want to kind of walk through the individuals committees. We have our
Sure.
our directors here that have responsibilities in those areas, if that's okay.
We do have those committees coming a little bit later in the presentation. It's on a later slide. So are there any questions or comments about this second half here?
Counselor Hillian.
Maybe I'll, just an interlude, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Garbett acknowledged their directors are here and I noticed that we have a new director and it might be appropriate for us to welcome him to this gathering now that he's seen us in action for a little while.
Everyone's been on their best behavior too, so I do
I think
appreciate
I
that.
thought
Mr.
it was gonna be a
Garvey.
little smoother than that, and my apologies, I wasn't able to connect earlier. So joining us today for his first committee of the whole, maybe other subsequent committees of the whole, is Jake Balababa, who is our new Director of Development Services. He started on Monday, and he's familiarizing himself with our organization on a minute-by-minute basis. And we're glad that he's joined our senior team from most recently from the town of Ladysmith, where he's the Director of Development Services there. I believe that was the title. And he has extensive experience in British Columbia at a senior level, and he's a great asset to our team.
And yeah, Jake's been great to chat with. So and I'm sure very busy. And just for a point of clarity, because when I read this, I did read these 2 pages as a recommendation, but each that is going to be its own separate recommendation as we go through this. Just so I'm
And sorry, I just noticed one inconsistency on your agenda with recommendations. When it talks about terms, we say terms of 2 years with the possibility of 2 renewals for a maximum of 6 years. And on screen, we have a different one. So what we're recommending is the 2 renewals for a maximum of 6 years on a committee. Yeah.
okay. So it's 6 years rather than 4. Okay.
Staff who are working
Is that-
with committees had recommended that for a little bit greater continuity on committees.
How come in my, so it says, so on the screen it says 1 renewal, and here it says 2 renewals, but to get to 6 years, my brain is thinking 3 renewals, 2 times 3 to get to 6 years.
You'd be appointed one time
Yeah.
for 2 years, then renewed after 2 years, and renewed a
more
second
times.
time for up to 3
Okay.
years.
The math is mathing now. Thank you. Okay. All right. Much appreciated. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. A few comments on these sections. One being the committee recruitment. I like everything in the staff report. The only addition that I'd like to table and hear other feedback is the residency requirements. It says residency requirements with a preference for Courtenay residents. And what I acknowledge is that there are members of Courtenay business community who might not be residents but operate businesses. So that would be the only question mark that I have for my councillor colleagues, if there's an interest in adding ownership of a Courtenay or has a business in Courtenay. And then my question is around the administration, and you've highlighted 2 models. So there's the existing model, which is the decentralized model. You're recommending the centralized model, but there's also the hybrid model. And I'm wondering if you can clarify the differences between the 2. I see that both have ledge services producing agendas and minutes and supporting with recruitment or leading recruitment. And so what would be the major differences between the 2? And maybe you could speak a little bit more around why you're recommending the centralized model.
With the hybrid model, more of the work would be shared with the department in question. So legislative services would, for example, maybe put out an ad in the paper to say we're recruiting for committees, but maybe all of those applications would go to the department, for example, for the first review. Things like that. It would just be more shared work with the department. So at this point, we're recommending the centralized model because it tends to reduce duplication of work. The reason we're saying dependent on capacity is we just want to make sure that that will fit within our work program once we get to the point where we can, we have the policies in place and it's time to take it on.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur. I don't see any further questions. Oh, Councillor McCollum.
Well, just to chime in on the point made about the residency requirements is a preference to Courtenay. I think it pretty well captures it. That it's not a hard requirement, it's just a preference towards which wouldn't exempt a business owner. I would interpret that as, and you know, I think generally the approach to a committee is that, you know, it has more to do with the candidate's attributes and knowledge of that particular topic. And we would want people that live in Courtenay, but certainly I don't think if we had somebody that was interested and knowledgeable in the area that we would ask them to, you know, yeah, exactly. So I think it's fine the way it is. It will, I imagine that it will be applied in a rational way. So.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor McCollum. Yeah, and unless we want an actual thing that says that it doesn't preclude people from outside, so that's also articulated. But yeah, I definitely agree. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. So I'm assuming that we're on page 2, committee recruitment. Is that kind of where we're at right now? How would this apply to existing committees where, you know, people have been on Parks and Rec for 20 years or something like that? Would the terms kick in effective now, or would those people all have to resign and potentially start over again? Or I know there's some reference in the report to saying goodbye to the Heritage Committee, but how would the Parks and Rec adapt to this new regime?
I think Susie might have a comment, but I will say that we're not looking to have a committee that is an absolute fresh start. We'd be looking for continuity on the committee. So it would not be a case of just saying you're all off the committee now. I believe Parks and Rec staff would work closely to understand what would work best for the members on the committee and how we can ensure that continuity moving forward.
Even if they've been on there for more than 6 years, would it be the new policy? It would still be, we'll work through it in the interim. Okay. Councillor McCollum.
Oh, I was gonna let Susie answer the question first. And then provide
Saunders.
context as well.
Sure. Thank you. Through the mayor to council, and my colleague, Ms. Proton, answered the question, and it reflects the discussion we had at the Parks and Rec Advisory Commission table as well, that there is a desire for that continuity, but also recognition that folks have been on the commission for extended periods of time. So also recognition that some are willing to step away to allow new folks to come to the table. So I think coming up with a transition plan that allows for that continuity of knowledge while also welcoming new members is something the current committee members are also supportive of and willing to do. And we would work with legislative services to find the best way to proceed with that.
Excellent.
Yeah, I knew Susie would say it better than I. I would also just add that there's been a lot of discussion around this, and there's a lot of agreement and alignment that committees work better when it's a wider section of the community. And there was talk on how to bring people from different demographics and backgrounds into the committee. So this all very much fits with previous discussions that have happened there. And I believe that is basically the only committee that we have currently that will be impacted by this. And there's been plenty of dialogue leading up to this conversation.
Yeah, much appreciated. Yeah, getting that diversity is absolutely critical. I guess one, and you know, looking at a worst case scenario where, you know, recruitment becomes a challenge or time capacity, those kinds of things. And you know, looking at that 6-year maximum, if there are people who hit that 6-year maximum, but there's difficulty recruitment, is there flexibility to extend the 6 years under extenuating circumstances? Or
Council could certainly direct that there be the opportunity for somebody to renew further if we weren't able to find people for the committee. What I have found is that if a municipality is doing regular recruitment and encouraging people to be on committees, I haven't found that there's been an issue with finding people for most committees.
Yeah, I being on the heritage one, Lawrence Burns had said that, you know, the last time that they did a recruitment, they got quite a few people applying, but then that was quite a while ago as well. So so it is, like you said, keeping up and keeping regular with those recruitment efforts. So I don't think we have. Oh yeah, we have quorum still. So Councillor Zolliker.
Yeah, apologies, I've got food in my mouth, but somewhere in the staff report, it speaks to support for volunteerism generally, and I think it speaks to childcare. And so is that in this, be resolved for that consideration?
It isn't in any of the resolutions. So if council is interested in adding support like childcare or any kind of for some committees, it would be acceptable, for example, to provide an honorarium, something like that. For some of them, like Board of Variance, you cannot do that with the legislation. But if council wanted to do something like that, like offer family care policies, things like that, like council's remuneration policy, please add that to the resolution.
Yeah, and I guess if I can have a follow up, Mayor, I think it's hard because we're considering such a shakeup with our committees, with the potential creation of new standing committees with the new council after the election. And so it's hard for me to have a strong opinion based on the fact that we haven't had direct feedback. At least I haven't heard from the Parks and Rec. Maybe, yeah.
Ms. Saunders.
No, the around issues around childcare or remuneration. Sorry, but is there an ability for it to be flexible based on the development of the terms of reference of future committees? Like, how would you see that?
It would probably be something that you'd want to have in the overall council policy. You
Okay.
don't necessarily need to provide direction now. This will come back to council once we've developed the policy. But I don't think we would want it in specific terms of reference because then it would not be equitable across council committees.
Ms. Saunders, did you want to add?
Sure, through the Mayor to Councillor Zolliker. I'll just share that in our discussions at the Parks and Rec Advisory Commission, there was discussion that when we're looking at recruitment of committee members, that access to childcare may help with recruiting folks. We have heard as different committee members have tried to recruit new members to the committee that the lack of childcare or support for childcare is a barrier to participation in the committee. And so I would offer that we have heard that feedback from Parks and Rec Advisory Commission members.
Okay. Councillor Zolliker.
Yeah, then I would move to add an item here to explore supports for participation on committees, including childcare and remuneration updates to the remuneration policy for committee members.
Okay, sounds good. And you'd like to speak to that, Councillor Cole Hamilton?
Yeah, I just wanted, I think this is a really great note by Councillor Jolicoeur. I really appreciate this. And if I recall, doesn't our compensation policy for council members also include elder care? I just want to make sure it's an exact mirror because I think that's a useful addition.
Yeah.
So if that's a friendly amendment to add that as well, that would be great.
Yeah, exactly. And then we just copy and paste the policies and they're all aligned. Thanks for that, councillors. Appreciate that, Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a useful thing to include in terms of the childcare and elder care. I'm not sure I agree about the like the remuneration aspect of it. These have been volunteer committees, and it does change things if, yeah, if we're seeking to compensate, we are not, like council is not compensated for committee attendance. So that would diverge from our own practice. And whereas if we limited it to childcare, it's addressing people's challenges in being able to attend a meeting in the evening, but it would still be in line with how we treat council and other forms of meeting attendance. So I would prefer that we just address the specific challenge of being able to attend a meeting, which is childcare costs. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Councillor McCollum and Councillor Zilker, or Councillor Killian.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify, there was a motion made to add a term to this list, but was the original motion already on the floor? So are we in order there?
We didn't technically have a seconder to that anyway. I considered it was just discussion at that point.
Okay.
I'm working on a new version of the motion. It sounds like there is some agreement about caregiving.
Subsequent.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add that I agree with Councillor McCollum's point. I don't think there should be an understanding that honorariums are available and for committee participation, unless there's some exceptional circumstance that dictates that, and that's something that could be brought to the council of the day. I think we want to preserve the spirit of volunteerism to the extent that we can. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Killian and Councillor Zilker.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm reflective of the work that the Accessibility Committee has done. And one of the other things that we heard from them around barriers to participation is also transportation. And so if we're not looking at honorariums for the volunteers, if we could also consider transportation costs like a bus ticket. I know that the Accessibility Committee has used that quite extensively. So, yeah, I think I agree that we might want to remove the compensation piece. But if we look at it from a perspective of how can we remove barriers to participation rather than that continues to support the idea that folks are volunteering, but we're removing barriers for them to be able to participate as a volunteer.
Okay, and Mr. Garbutt.
If it may, through the mayor to council, if it may assist, ultimately the committees that we're talking about here are not the primary focus of those challenges or focus areas. I believe that we can do the work to understand that. Honoraria for participation in different initiatives of the municipalities would be consistent with other board or other council policy at this point. So if we were to engage in a committee and or hear from community that this would be something in a type of community committee, then we can work towards honoraria. There is a excellent report on the CVRD yesterday about on honorarium for Indigenous participation, which is extremely common. So this is work we'll be doing as well.
Thanks for that. Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate the discussion here. And I'm of the same opinion, I think, as most people that think honorary is, I'm not supportive of that, but I'm supportive of the others, as I think they all fall into this out-of-pocket removal of barriers. So you're not like worse off than you were financially by contributing to a city process. But there was that discussion last night at the CVRD, and I was thinking about that as well. And often committees which invite people with lived experience or people who are coming there for, representing First Nations to have some form of honoraria. That seems to me that's maybe kind of a separate. That is its own issue rather than a general sort of for everyone who shows up. So I'm supportive of us giving some thought to that if we don't already have policy, which I don't think we do. But the idea that just there's a meeting fee that will be handed out to everyone for showing up is not something I'd support.
Thanks for your comments, Sarah, and Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, just to pick up on that, and also just logistically in terms of administering payments for whole committees for small amounts of money is also, I don't know that it's really worth creating new processes around that when you're being invited to join a committee. But yeah, I mean, to the point, we are talking about the committee membership and what the policy is around that. I think there's been some great points made around the honorarium, but that would be applying to people that are being asked to attend and contribute to a meeting for their perspective or something that they have to bring, which is different than being paid to attend a committee that you're on. So they are two separate things, and I think there could be some value in having a separate discussion around how we could implement some policy around that as well. But I mean, I think that the policy is yet to be developed, and we've had some really good points raised. And I wouldn't limit what kind of supports are available to strictly caregiving. Anything that falls under the removing barriers for attendance would be, I think, well supported by anyone at the table here. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that. And Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. My apologies for having to step out for a moment, so I did miss a little bit of the discussion. But I'm assuming we're talking about committees that are linked to the city, that not other committees that. Okay, so and we're talking about potential supports for people on those committees for those things. Are you suggesting, Councillor McCollum, that we make that more broad? Just saying support? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we've had I think a good discussion. Any further comments or questions? Everybody's comfortable with the motion on the screen as it's written. All those in favor?
We don't have a mover and
Oh,
seconder.
we need to move in, sorry.
No.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. And I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries.
Okay, let me just get the slide back up. Okay, so next
Variance.
next item is Board of Variance. So we are
Okay.
required to have a Board of Variance. The bylaw is very old, 32 years old. It still has roommates, but it likes its roommates now. And we're just looking for direction to update it, along with a lot of our other bylaws and policies regarding committees. It's time for an update, and we will also do some recruitment pretty soon too.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries.
Okay, now we're moving into some of the topics around our committees that do exist. So we're going to put Jake on the spot tonight as representing Development Services. The Heritage Advisory Commission is a commission we've had for a long time. Currently, it's not well integrated into city planning processes, and Development Services has found that they are not able to dedicate staff time to the commission. There is one ongoing project that I understand can now be completed by staff. So we're looking for council direction on what you would like to do with the Heritage Commission at this time.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And I've been on the Heritage Commission for the past number of years. I think one of the things, as we have lost some members just since I've been on it, is I know it's not here, but looking at some form or way to recognize the folks that have dedicated, in some cases, decades of their life to this committee. And to just kind of keep that in the back of our minds as we discuss the rest of this as well. But with that, I'll pass it over to Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Am I correct in assuming that the clock project hasn't been It hasn't
It
been.
is not finished. We have not gotten
Okay.
a completion on that yet.
All right. So in terms of this commission, I don't have any problem with the idea around discontinuing this and recognizing volunteers for sure. But I guess my larger question is around heritage in general. I know we often get questions about, isn't that a heritage site? And what are we doing to protect heritage buildings? What are we doing to protect heritage locations, parks, those kinds of things? So I guess I'm wondering if this commission goes, which is not really doing that broader work, is there a way, obviously not in this term, but are we exploring opportunities to look at heritage in general and including obviously First Nations history as well? Thanks.
Thanks for the question, Mr. Garland.
Through the mayor, and so if it's okay with Jake, I'll speak to this. I was the advisor to the Heritage Advisory Commission as a frontline staffer. It's an extremely long-standing commission that has ebbed and flowed given the issues inside the community. The staff report provides an overview of like a snapshot of the last 4 years. The council may recall, we were through COVID. It's quite a, there's a number of factors, and then we had an unprecedented amount of statutory work that the Development Services Department had to do, and we were undertaking an official community plan review and a number of those items. A review of the official community plan actually highlights the need to acknowledge and protect and understand heritage issues inside the community, and it includes extending that beyond a settler-focused history. So I guess I would just say to council, I honor the feedback from the Development Services Department and would say that we are approaching some changes given how much statutory work's been done. This has been core work of the Development Services Department at least over the last 20 years. And we have found ourselves in a situation where it's been difficult to support this committee because of circumstances as well as changes amongst the committee themselves. So the concept of making sure we honor the official community plan, which is core to our strategic priorities and has been a commitment in the organization, both on our own organizational culture and commitments. So right now it's a little bit challenged to support it. The commission itself needs some work and some recruitment, et cetera. But I would just say, I just wanted to provide a broader discussion on the Heritage Committee and its long history, as well as why it's been a bit of a challenge at this point. So, the options in front of us related to discontinuation or, the word suspend there are kind of like they may be sort of pejorative terms, but the idea of pausing as we gather ourselves and reform around the commitments in the community plan as it relates to all forms of heritage is something that, as the city manager, wanted to reflect to council because of how we've structured our strategic priorities around the commitments in the community plan. So I just offer that, and I don't mean to insert myself in the discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick follow-up. So, I mean, it sounds like we are obviously doing that type of work within the context that you just described, the official community plan, et cetera. So just a suggestion for communications, if in fact this commission does dissolve, that we message out that, some of the work that we are doing around this, that if this commission goes, it doesn't mean that it's not important and valued and work isn't being done. And just when I hear the word pause, I hope it's not pause like the bench program that just pause for, like, sometimes pause indicates that we're going to come back to it. So maybe just, if we're going in a different direction, I think just being really clear about that rather than maybe this perception that this will be resurrected in some way. Anyway, thanks.
No, I appreciate that. That was one of my biggest concerns, that if the option for pause was there to maybe include in that a timeline or a deadline kind of thing to make a decision, for sure. Councillor Jolicoeur?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Actually, my thinking on this is very similar to Councillor Moran's, and appreciate the city manager speaking to the OCP, because further down on the recommendations today, we're asked to consider new committees for the next council. And I know that we have the OCP's implementation action plan being developed. And I'm wondering if one of the, and this is something we have heard from folks who were quite engaged in the development of the OCP, is how do we engage the community in the implementation? And I recognize that at least two objectives with multiple policies under the art, culture, and heritage section of the OCP speak specifically to heritage. So I think the communication to Councillor Moran's point is really important for those who are particularly passionate about heritage, that we're not actually stopping heritage work. It's part of the OCP plan. And I guess what I would be looking for is for us to commit to advancing the heritage work just through the OCP implementation, potentially a committee. Maybe the city manager, you have any insight on if that's coming forward in part of that work? I don't know if a committee was being planned or not, but I think it's relevant to today's discussion, at least further down for new committees. But I think tied to this, because if we repeal this, then I think we need to find where this sits.
Thank you for, through the mayor, thank you for the question, Councilor Jolicoeur. The implementation committee was an original concept when the 2021 OCP updated, and our most recent adoption of the OCP with changes that remains. I think we'll work with the Director of Development Services to understand, because there are significant statutory limitations as to how you engage the public as it relates to implementation of the OCP. And so it's something that because we don't have public hearings anymore, we don't have city held community information meetings. So it's something that I plan to discuss and ask through our new director, as well as with the manager of long range planning, Ms. Goddard, to assist in coming back to council with that. Because when the OCP was adopted, the 21 version of the OCP was adopted, there was discussion about that as well. And we're in the throes of understanding how to implement, and the subsequent zoning changes, authorities, approvals, and engagement it affects how we use the public to implement. But it's some work that will definitely be important with the department going forward.
All right, thanks for some of that clarity. And Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I had the opportunity to represent the city on the Heritage Committee 2018 when I first got elected, until it kind of disbanded during COVID. And there were a lot of valuable contributions, and none of the discussion here I think should be to undercut any of that. But because we do see development services obviously does critical work in our community, and I think we're all aware of the importance of expediting the approval of housing and getting units up. And I think if it's a matter of diverting energy from that, I think a universally acknowledged vital part of the work that we do, then we may unfortunately have to do some rebalancing. And I think this is part of it. And I hear that some of the work may be done through the official community plan. And I also, when I hear people talking about sort of a re-envisioning of heritage, it seems like it might fit actually more within possibly recreation, culture, and community services. But anyway, I think at this point, and I agree with Councillor Moran, I think to say suspend unless we're actually planning to bring it back at some point, maybe, or rephase, I think is the current term being used in BC. I think we'd have to be just honest with ourselves that we're having to, politics is about making hard choices with limited resources, and this is not an easy choice, and it's not a reflection on the good work done, but I think it is the right one.
Thanks for your comments. And Councillor Elaine.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I generally agree with what's being stated, but I think that there may be some strategic reasons to, rather than suspend this, potentially see if we could not review and reconstitute. One of the things that occurs to me is that we haven't really moved forward with it, but we have talked about renaming. And That's a political hot potato in some regards. You know, when you talk about particular buildings or names of parts of the community. But I think it's the sort of thing that a committee with representation from a cross-section of the community, that there'd be significant advantage to having the support of a committee like that as a potential vehicle for discussing some of that. So I don't know where that will fit into the work of the next council, but I would encourage us to look at reconstituting a committee that deals with community heritage and related matters, as opposed to either suspending or discontinuing. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that perspective, Councillor Hillian. I have to say, I especially in the context of Councillor Hillian or Councillor Cole Hamilton's thoughts of it possibly moving into the different section there as well under cultural. I think that there's definitely, I mean, it might find sort of a resurgence and a revibrance happening when. Again, the time I spent on there was definitely things being discussed and stuff happening. So there's definitely value there. So, I mean, again, that's one of my challenges of seeing it be decommissioned or canceled. So, Councillor Hillian.
Thanks. Yeah, I meant to say that I also thought that that was a potential to explore housing it in a different city department. But I wonder also if this might be something that could be referred to the new council's strategic planning process, you know, to see where this might fit in that. You know, I agree with the comments that have been made about wanting to honor and acknowledge the people who've served on this, and you know, if we do. I mean, it would be good to formalize whatever we are doing with it. But I think it would be a better message to the community that we're looking to reconstitute this function rather than whatever other verbs we might come up with. Thanks.
Fair enough. I think that rephase may have gotten me closer to bingo. But, all right, so it's been a great discussion. I'm not sure where that puts us in terms of. So the motion on the screen has been moved and seconded, and that is to discontinue and to repeal the bylaw. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Hillian?
Where would that leave the whole process? I think the point that Councillor Moran made was a good one, that sometimes when we pause things without a plan, without anything definite, they just wither away.
Yeah, and I think that comment about sending it to strategic planning does give it a place to land, but I'll pass it over to Mr. Garbett for his comments.
Thank you. Through the mayor, there's a motion on the floor, so I don't know if it's appropriate to speak to it. If council wanted to provide direction, including something like referring the matter to council strategic planning, that would give a definition.
Okay, Councilor McCollum.
Yeah, I mean, at this juncture, I don't see a problem with repealing the bylaw. The committee has languished if we are going to have some type of heritage input around heritage and cultural heritage at the city. That will be a whole new discussion, and you know, we have policy coming back on committees. There's nothing that would prevent committee from coming back. I don't know that we need to maintain the old bylaw for that process to happen. If there's an initiative and a need to strike a committee, we're getting new policy on how that should go. So I think it's still adequate housekeeping and doesn't prevent future decision makers from bringing in something that's more relevant to the time.
Yeah, thanks for that. No, I appreciate it. My only concern is depending on what happens after the job review this fall, depending who's at this table, they may have no historical or institutional knowledge And that just leaves it as a pretty big gap if it's not for sure coming back. That's my only concern, but I take your point. Councilor Moore.
Yeah, just a question to our city manager. Is it preferable to have some specifics around this? So either amending this to include and refer the topic to the next council strategic planning, or does staff have enough feedback to do that without specific direction? So that it doesn't get dropped, as Councillor Hillian is.
Thank you. Thank you for the question through the mayor. I think so the recommendation, the options are pretty specific. So if again, there's a motion on the floor, if there's another motion that passes, I think it would be, what I'm hearing from council is that if that was the successful motion, then it would be appropriate to have direction, then it would have a bookend, and then the next council could decide whether they want to spend time or not.
And just to clarify, that other motion is to pause as opposed to discontinue. Is that what you mean? If
Yes.
Sorry.
Cautious, mayor, because
Yes.
I do want
I
to
understand.
suggest as a staff member another
Yep.
alternative.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
Understood.
I'm clear that this commission stands down. I don't know if stand down, if that means permanently. I don't know what the definition of stand down is, but anyway, and that in addition to that, that the topic of heritage is carried forward to the next council. So to me, they're two. This commission, I think we're pretty clear that this commission is done, but that doesn't mean that heritage work is not going to continue. And I was asking if we need a subsequent motion to direct staff for that. Or maybe we just vote on this and then, okay, all right.
okay. Thanks. I know it's been a discussion and with some potential out there, but I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move that council requests staff review and consider the potential for reconstitution of community heritage work as part of the next council strategic planning process.
Could I also ask that possibly either there or in a subsequent, there was a comment, I think, that was reiterated a couple times about acknowledging members as well, if that's necessary. Anyway, sorry. If you think it's appropriate.
Sure, I'll add on at the end with appropriate acknowledgement of previous Heritage Committee members.
Yeah.
It may just take a moment to pop up on the screen, so we'll just take a second. And if Councillor Cole Hamilton, if you feel you have a grasp of it, if you want to speak to
I
it.
think my feeling is the reconstitute, I'm not sure is necessarily what I'm wanting us to do. I think we're looking to develop something that is more focused and quite possibly doesn't live in development services anymore. Maybe it's in rec and cultural services. So I'm just wondering if you're in agreement with that sort of general approach, Councillor Hill, and if you could make something that I think reconstitute to me just means we're going to put it back again later, the exact same thing.
I would define reconstituting as coming up with a new constitution, which is the essence of what something is, which could include any of the things that you've talked about. But if it was more clear, then we could eliminate that word.
All right. And I actually, I think Councillor Moore made a point of order on whether or not it was seconded before we get into too much of a discussion.
Second.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, I would prefer that we take an approach that's kind of more similar to what Councillor Moran outlined in our comments at the just before we voted on the last motion, that I think it is useful for staff to consider how we take care of heritage and how we incorporate that into the city's practices and include some background information, some, you know, potential ways forward for the next council. But in my mind, we've just made a decision to dispense with a committee that has been paused for some time. And so it has been paused. Now we're recognizing that that's not the approach that we're going to take to preserving heritage. And so I think that there's value in having that discussion and what that could look like. But to me, the way that this motion sounds is that we're asking for another committee to be made about the committee that we just decided we don't need anymore. So I think it's just going to be very confusing for staff to action this, given our discussion tonight. And I think maybe we all have a slightly different perspective on what this is supposed to look like. But I would leave it as an open-ended discussion for the next council. And yeah, I guess that's enough for me.
Thanks for your comments. Mr. Garber, did you want
Through the mayor, if I may, what I heard, I think the consensus, or at least conversation around, is that refer the matter of community heritage work to the next council strategic planning process, as a just trying to bring together the commentary, because how it's done could be different than the past process. And I also heard from some members of council that the overall intention of heritage work could be broader, as the previous longstanding work of our heritage committee was primarily related to the built form, and not wholly, but mostly. So thank you for the opportunity to have input.
Okay, appreciate that. I know it's difficult. Councillor Warren.
Yeah, I was just going to propose an amendment that takes out reconstitution and just says refer the topic of community heritage work to the next. So to me, that's a broader, that doesn't define what that looks like. Okay, thanks.
Amendment is there. Reconstitution is unconstituted, I guess, or I see Councillor Frisch, or Councillor Frisch, sorry, Councillor Hillings turned his mic off. If everybody's comfortable taking a vote on what's on the, did you have Councillor?
Why not more wordsmithing? Or maybe it's just understood that I feel like over the course of this discussion, we've gone from, as Jeff was just saying, from the old definition of heritage to built form to a broader one. And it doesn't say that here, but that we're sort of envisioning heritage in a larger context. But I'm assuming that that will be, does that need to be added, or does staff have kind of guidance on that?
Through the mayor, if council wanted to add that, but the people around the table, your staff around the table that will still be here after the, we know we're all going to be here after the, I think the mayor called the job interview process. I think we understand that, but I think if the intention of this council is to broaden it, I would add the words to that effect.
I might ask for what perhaps, and I'm just not, the language isn't coming to mind, but what would be the appropriate I'll cede the floor.
Councillor Hilling may have, he's.
Yeah, that the committee of the whole requests that staff refer the matter of community heritage work, including the possibility of a broader mandate, to the next council strategic planning process, with appropriate acknowledgement of past heritage committee members.
All right, not too long, just right, I think. And again, that this will land on, you know, a future council who will interpret this and take the advice of staff as they will and move forward. So appreciate the lengthy discussion on this. I know we've kind of got right into the weeds on some of this stuff, but I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. So thanks very much for that. All right, now we're on to Parks and Rec, I believe.
Thanks. So our other existing commission slash committee has both terms of reference and a bylaw. Its current function is advising staff, so it has moved away from what it said in the bylaw, which I believe was from the 70s. It doesn't really function as a commission anymore. A commission is usually constituted that way so it can operate services on behalf of the municipality. And rec staff have worked to align the Parks and Rec Commission with current procedures in the procedure bylaw. So staff have been working to modernize some of the aspects of the Parks and Rec Committee. We have a recommendation here. For this one, repealing the bylaw does not mean getting rid of the committee or changing much of what is happening right now. It's just some housekeeping to get rid of an old bylaw that doesn't really apply anymore. We've already talked a bit about centralizing administration. And then the committee is still operating, but we're recommending that when the next council discusses subject matter for committees, that it can also review existing committees at that time, which would be the Park and Rec Commission. And of course, Susie is here as well, and she's the one who attends.
Moved and seconded. I don't see any questions or comments. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, now we're getting on to external appointments.
Mm.
Well, we're closer to the end of the meeting. I think this is the last kind of meaty topic here. So there's a lot of appointments that you all do, 43 different appointed positions, or an average of about 7 per member, and a third of those are discretionary. If you have more internal committees, there will be more appointments and also a greater portion that are discretionary. We have a policy, but that's not consistent with current practice right now. So we're looking for council direction on a number of aspects of the policy. So the first discussion point is we can either include this in the policy or not, but it might be helpful to have a shared understanding of the purpose of external appointments and how council may want to evaluate discretionary appointments. At this point, we've had external appointments that just continue from council to council, and there hasn't been a review process. So we're looking for some discussion for what you want to see with your external appointments.
Thanks for that. And I'll pass it over to Councillor McCall.
Yeah, one thing, I mean, I have a bunch of suggestions here, so I'll just go with my first thought and get back in line. One aspect to this is that I have a sense that there is sometimes a need based on what the issues are at hand of an external committee that really sees a value in having some input from the city due to, you know, whatever the circumstances are at a certain point in time. And then, you know, there is a council person that is incorporated into that committee. But sometimes the work of the committee changes over time and the composition doesn't necessarily. And given that, you know, these appointments do take up a considerable amount of time for each and every member of council, that I do wonder if we're going to have external appointments, if it wouldn't make sense that we request, like that we require a formal request, that like we don't just by default assign someone, that it's confirmed every, you know, 2 years or whatever, that there is a need and a desire to have a council member attend the meetings. because, yeah, sometimes I think that things continue as they are because there's no point in it where anyone stops and thinks, is it valuable to have a council member contribute or not? And by formalizing it in some way where we ask for a request at certain intervals, I think, and why, like maybe a request with an explanation as to, you know, what, yeah, I don't know. I haven't really thought out the details of it, to be honest, but yeah, how council could contribute and just a formal request rather than just by default sending somebody, because that's what the past practice was, I guess, is summary of my thoughts.
Okay, thanks for those. And Councillor Jolker.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Great questions. I'm looking forward to diving into this. I think the staff report from 2023 articulates the purpose question. I wouldn't add much more from that report, and there was a lot of work that you guys did on that. And so I wouldn't want to take away, but what I would say is obviously it allows council members and council more broadly to be connected to the issues facing our community. And I think most of the external appointments are somehow tied to either our OCP and or our council strategic plan, and connected with groups who are partnering in that work in the community. When it comes to the evaluation, I agree. I think a formal request, and when I was thinking about some of these questions, and as someone who's on a lot of these external appointments, including some that have staff appointments as well, there's a few that I, in my judgment, view have clearly technical specific activities where a staff appointment might be more applicable. And they are more on the ground around the work plan and the workflows in our processes. And those same groups on occasion also have advocacy related issues. I think about most recently the Food Policy Council and the issue around food banks that came forward. And then they were talking about things like the rent for Native Sons Hall for the farmers market, which, is a staff thing because we have a staff rental policy. So I think whatever we end up deciding on, I think being able to also clearly support council and future councils in understanding their role at committee, and being able to understand how and where to seek staff support if there isn't already a staff assigned to those groups. That's just some initial feedback I have from my experience over the last few years. But I agree, a criteria that you've set out here, I think makes sense to me. And what I would say, and Councillor Morin can probably speak to this, is that to Councillor McCollum's point, some of them have evolved over time to moving less around advocacy to more technical on the ground activities, which I think for me feels more of a staff level. And so I think one of the criteria that I would say is that we just include a process for checking in as a council, whether or not we are best suited to be at that committee, or if it's now maybe time for a staff person to come in if they're not already existingly there. Thanks.
Thanks for your comments, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, good points. It occurs to me that we eliminated one appointment tonight, so we're down to 42.
Potentially.
I would say that there are probably a few other appointments that are going to lapse. I would say the physician recruitment committee has come and gone. The Couscous Sim project is pretty much wrapped up, very close to anyway. And so, there may be some others that can be reviewed by the next council. But what I was going to suggest, I think the regional district actually has a pretty good process for enabling people to report on a yearly basis on external appointments. And that would make sense to me. I know that we have the opportunity at council meetings for, council reports, which is theoretically to talk about what we're doing with external appointments. But oftentimes that gets short-circuited because, we don't want to prolong the meeting any further. So I think that process of requesting council members to provide some sort of brief written report on significant work that's been done that the committees are involved in on a yearly basis would provide a public record and something to be shared with other council members, and wouldn't involve a whole lot of extra work. So that would be one suggestion I would put forward for consideration.
Excellent. Really appreciate that one, for sure. Councillor McCollum. Oh. I think you've spoken already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go to Councillor Moore and then I'll come back. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully tonight we can take off a couple of these that we know, like, as you said, couscous some is probably coming to an end, and a couple of others that have been sort of redone. Canada Day, I don't know if we still, it's a question for staff. Do we still need a council liaison now that we're doing that differently? So I think we need to like quickly go through them one by one and just say if they're still relevant or not. I also think that having a bit of equity in terms of who's, who's allocated to what. So I'm cognizant of some council members who are not on the regional district, and obviously, like, I think the regional district is a bit separate because you get there's remuneration for that, but in terms of the other committees, there isn't. And so if you're not on the regional district, I mean, obviously you're putting in a ton of extra time, but you are being compensated, whereas, there may be a propensity to load up the people who are in the regional district with these other appointments, which they're not being compensated for. So I think we need to, I don't know how we put that in the in the policy, but something around equitable distribution of appointments, I think would be important. And I agree with Councillor Jolicoeur that a couple of these committees, I feel the role for council has maybe lessened, and not to put more onto staff, but sometimes staff are attending because, because of their own work. It aligns with what these committees are doing. And I don't know if we need to duplicate that representation. I know there's something, well, I'll end it there because I'll go on to a different topic after. Thanks.
All right, thanks for your thoughts, and back to Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, I guess I partially want to circle back to my earlier point around receiving communication from the committees about the value of having council contribute. I think different committees see the council attendance differently depending on the committee and the culture of it and why it started. And I think getting really clear on what the committee is seeking by having a member of council there, is it to convey relevant information? Because if that's the case, then maybe it is actually more relevant to ask that a city staff member attend once every number of months, where if it's to have kind of more political insight, it depends on what the committee is, but also depending on the makeup of council, there may need to be clear communication on the value of asking someone on council to come and attend a committee. Currently the culture at this council table has been very engaged with community partners and these various organizations that do a lot of them are doing social service work in our community, and we're looking for ways to support that and understand the gaps, but that's not always going to be what the culture of the council table is. And I think getting clear on how committees can seek council's input and why would probably serve the community better going forward, for just some consistency around that and why that's an important part of the work that council members do. And some of that I think does need to come from these organizations that are asking people to take an afternoon out of their schedule to participate. So I just wanted to follow up my earlier comments with that. Thanks.
Right, thanks for that. Yeah, and I think, you know, I don't know if it's worthwhile. I mean, we've already talked about some of the committees that it looks like there's you know, not a need for if we want to go through the list, and if that would be helpful to kind of say, you know, for right now, and that can be our recommendation for the next council, and then the next council can say, okay, let's appoint or not appoint, because I mean, we're, you know, months away from the next election. So I don't know if that makes sense to council or not, but Councilor Moore.
Go ahead.
Just kind of following up on that as well, that, you know, if we're going to hone this down and then, you know, it's an open question if there's potentially other committees or organizations that at a later date will seek council's input, then we actually have a formal, clear way in which that happens. It's like, oh yeah, you know, you just need to make a formal request. And then when we look at lists like this down the road, we have a paper trail as to when we started and why, as opposed to, you know, trying to piece it together after the fact. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and I mean, like one that's, I mean, we meet with we have an appointment to the BIA, but not to the Chamber of Commerce. But, you know, the Chamber of Commerce may or may not be a useful one. I did talk with a previous executive director, and we were working on it. But again, it's the Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce, so there's multiple governments, et cetera. So yeah, definitely like that idea.
Yeah, I really like Councillor McCollum's idea. I personally think we need to pare down this list tonight to get a baseline of a very short list of the necessary appointments. The next council might not be prepared to, I mean, these are all basically voluntary appointments. I mean, I know that I went off an appointment and reached out to people to see if they would be interested in taking my spot, and nobody did. And you know, we're not compensating for that, so we can't really force council members to fulfill these appointments. And I don't know if Councillor Hilliam would have that information, whether there's more appointments now than there used to be. But I just think, you know, with the workload that we already have, in the past, I've had, you know, 3 or 4, even I think at least 4 appointments. I think others currently do. I think that's a lot of time to commit. I think also the point that Councillor McCollum made about the rationale for having a council member, because I think, you know, understandably, I mean, if I was a community organization and I could regularly get the ear of a council member to potentially advocate for me, or for, you know, these are obviously extremely worthwhile groups, then yeah, then I would do it. But I think, you know, having clarity around that. I know there's something else in the report about whether we are appointed to organizations that we fund. I think that's really tricky because we fund like most of them. My last comment would be that just if I just did my own little notation of question marks and X's, and it literally cuts out about half of the committees that are either, you know, coming to a close, have already, I mean, I can say right now that there is no active community action team anymore. And I was involved in that, and there were various efforts to reconstitute it. But you know, the funding for that has gone. So you know, it's debatable whether that will ever resurface. So yeah, I mean, I think that we need to have a pared down baseline to present to the next council, and implement some of the suggestions that Councillor McCollum talked about. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that, if I look at this council, does seem to be quite accessible, and you know, really what I see that the conversation is that, you know, for appointed to these committees, then you have these serendipitous opportunities where maybe we're providing value there, but if there is an issue at any point, people can contact any member of council. We have meet the mayor appointments, which I'd probably recommend those continue into the future, but there are ways to communicate with this council outside of us being appointed and relying on, serendipity to provide value. But Council McCollum.
Yeah, the other point I just wanted to pick up on too is committees that we've provided funding for has, there's a case to be made that it's, useful to have council at the table, but at the same time, there is a bit of a trade-off there because I think once you have a council member at the committee, there's this assumption that then all of council is really up on the work because you have a representative. And we, as 7 individuals and, busy schedules, there isn't an avenue where we all share the information of committees. And I think in a way it creates, a false assumption that, that is a real conduit to having like the city being informed in the work of these committees when in fact they're basically engaging with one person at the council table. And I think if we were to not have that in place and say, oh, you're being funded by the city, so we expect to get an update once a year as a delegation, that could potentially be a better way to engage with council around these, these pieces of funding that are given out than having someone attend a monthly meeting. So yeah, just wanted to share that perspective that even when it is a matter of receiving city funding, that it's not necessarily advantageous for the organization to simply have that representative there. I mean, obviously there's other information that's being exchanged, but yeah, it is limited to one person. And I think sometimes there's the idea that it goes beyond that when it frequently doesn't.
Thanks for articulating that comment. Councillor Gilles.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up on that, I think it is kind of a patch meal approach where we have some of the multi-year funded agencies coming and doing annual presentations and others don't. And then we have some agencies who have multi-year funding that then come for us for project specific funding. And do they come back and give us a report on that project? And so I think, yeah, this is kind of outside the scope of this conversation, but I think we have some cleanup to do on that file as well. But I would appreciate, I think, if I'm on council next term to have, and for all council members to be able to have the resources available to them to be able to report back. And so I think one of the questions here is verbal or written. Maybe it's a section in the council updates that we report back on the external appointments so that there is something there. And what I would say too is I think that there's a piece here that's not very clear to me, but I think I would really appreciate being able to have some sort of matrix that clarifies the role of staff, the role of council, so that if there is an external appointed agency, organization, group, that council appoints a council member, that then we can share that back and say, this is the role of the council member. If you have specific staff related questions, just so that council is not also in a position to have to be the subject matter expert in our rental policy and each subject within that policy, because that has often been asked. And so it's like, oh, here's the right email, here's the right person. But I have often wondered if there are better suited places for council members rather than staff. And so I think that would be also helpful.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think that workflow definitely, and I think I've talked to council, there's things that go on that create blind spots for all of us when we're not at those meetings. And I think some of the advantages of having staff is that they tend to be pretty attuned to, oh, this is something that council should be aware of, and they can do that through a briefing note. But we don't do briefing notes for each other. So definitely a bit of a gap there. So Councillor Ford. Did you want to jump in, Mr. Garbutt? Sorry.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I just want to clarify where we have funding agreements and where we have agreements in place, we do have a reporting requirement. Just want to make that clear. But to Councillor Jolicoeur's, I just meant to Councillor Jolicoeur's point. We have all sorts of things that are happening around that, and it it would benefit from some direction and analysis on our end.
Appreciate that. Councillor Killian.
Thanks. Yeah, I do appreciate the need to tidy up the process. But I don't want us to abandon it. You know, I think that there's a lot of value in council members remaining connected to the life of the city that gets expressed through these various organizations. Both in terms of you know, contributing to whatever the issue is at hand, but also lending support to these organizations and keeping our fingers on the pulse of what's going on to help inform our other related decisions. So I would certainly be in favor of looking at the various appointments and considering, you know, which should remain and which can go. Seeing ones where we've got staff and council members both attending and pare those down and, you know, figure out a way to make that work more effectively. I don't know, does the coalition to end homelessness still exist? It seems to be going through a bit of an evolution, and so, you know, there's going to be changes in the community that are going to impact this as well. And we also have new organizations coming along. For example, there's going to be the Housing Corporation through the regional district is going to have some appointments from that board that presumably council members would be eligible for as well. So you know, the landscape will change, but I think we could do some significant cleanup in preparation for that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that that's maybe not acknowledged here, and it might be hard to acknowledge, is that I would expect, looking around this table, that many of us are part of boards, other organizations, choirs, sports groups, etc., where we are there prior potentially to even being on council, but because we are council members, that shifts some of the conversations that happen. So it's almost like you're on for those types of things that we do. I'm just looking at my own life, but I've heard comments from people who are at a meeting for one thing and they're being told things specifically because they're a counselor, and not that it necessarily goes on this list, but I think I just want to acknowledge the fact that council members are on other things that aren't even council related, yet being approached as counselors. So Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, that's definitely part of the job. Undoubtedly. Yeah, the other comment I wanted to make is that in the process of getting clear, you know, when some of these committees and organizations would maybe benefit more from like the information aspect of having engagement with staff, that I also want to caution that I don't think we just want to replace sending council members with staff because you know, I think it's great to communicate that if a committee is in need of engagement and needs some really clear information about some policy change, that they should be encouraged to, you know, work with the city to get a staff member to come to a portion of their meeting, maybe to answer some questions. But I don't think we want to be soaking up staff time with having regular committee, you know, committee commitments. Because yeah, I mean, it's often senior staff that attend these things, and it's yeah, not an efficient way of getting things done. So I think we have to be really careful not to create more work in saying that, you know, politically, like a political person is ill suited, therefore, yeah, get a staff member to come and fill that gap. So just want to be clear that that's not what I'm suggesting here.
Fair enough. Thanks for that clarity, Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I mean, given the discussion we just had about the Heritage Committee, I think that was just pointing to the fact that having staff heavily engaged in the committee, it has a cost in terms of other work that can't be done. Perhaps the middle ground is if it's not going to be necessarily useful for an elected official because people on the committee are looking for more staff style responses, then perhaps it'd be great for the city for the person who's responsible for that area of the city to make contact with the chair saying, well, I would love to come to the meetings. Work doesn't allow that, but I'm available if you have questions or if there are specific things you need to know about, get in touch. And that can be an as needed method of contact with staff rather than staff going for having to drive somewhere, to go through an hour meeting, get back to work, get back to what they're doing. I think it could be a more efficient way, and probably also for the committees themselves to be like, I got a question, you can just fire it off on a Tuesday afternoon, even if your meeting isn't for a week. So that could be a way to go.
Fair enough. And acknowledging that staff might be sitting there in a Zoom meeting and trying to, keep up on emails and all the other things, but then you're not necessarily as present. Councillor Moore.
I'm wondering if I could just bring up a few of these to get clarification on whether they're in existence anymore or if they're phasing out. So the Finance Select Committee, is that still a committee or?
As far as I know, it exists, but has not met.
Yes, there is some history of the Finance Select Committee in the 2023 report. I'm just scrolling up. I think the last meeting was just around the beginning of COVID. And then staff had to refocus their work on the emergency. There was direction from council to review the terms of reference of the finance committee. I believe that has now been kind of moved forward to the next council term when council discusses.
So that's one that's going to be looked at. And then another one is the Junction Community Advisory. Is that still? Anybody know if that's still?
There hasn't been a political, like I attended maybe one or two, but I don't think there's been any political connection there. And then things got very quiet. So I'll pass it over to Ms. Saunders.
Thank you, through the mayor to council. I can't speak to the immediate current situation, but I do remember a transition from, I think, the mayor yourself attending to staff attending. And at the same time, staff began attending the Community Advisory Committee for the Super 8. So there was a transition point a couple of years ago from mayor or council attending to staff being in attendance. And it was a combination of bylaw development services or recreation, depending on the topic.
Which kind of makes more sense to me. And again, on a as needed basis, I don't think that, staff needs to go to all of those meetings if they're still occurring. And then Councillor Hillian brought up Couscous and the physician recruitment. I'm assuming those we would just leave until next term and find out where things are at with those two. And then I guess the other one is, I already mentioned the community action team, I think can be just taken off because it's not happening. And so the other one is the Canada Day. Does staff feel that now that we have our events coordinator, do we need a council liaison? Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I
So that
think
one might be
those
done.
were the, oh, and early years, that's still happening.
I don't know. I haven't attended a meeting in some time.
You still get
The-
invites?
So that
Yeah, I
would be
don't,
more.
the coordinator changed, and yeah, I think I
Not really
dropped
meeting.
off, yeah. I have a suggestion around, this list. Aside from the ones that we know are not, happening any longer, I mean, between now and when the next council convenes, we could communicate that we would like a formal request for future appointments, and then the next council could deliberate on whether or not this is appointments that they want to send somebody for or not, and then it kind of puts that decision-making in the hands of the next council, and also initiates that process of getting a formalized request in place before people are appointed.
I think that's a great idea. I recall a conversation around this might have, in addition or part of that request would be getting an updated terms of reference, all those kinds of things. So we'd have that all on file. Because right now we just know what it is because we know what it is. But having those terms of references really would help solidify it as well. I don't see any microphones on, but we went through a list of a few things, and Adriana is doing some cross throughs. And one of the things we do, even with the ones that are crossed through, we have a feeling that they're closed, but we could even reach out to them and just confirm, you know, as far as we know. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah. Just trying to get through these yellow parts, questions that staff have. I don't think we need to set a limit on discretionary appointments. We don't know what they are right now. If you scroll up, Madam Clerk, I think the other question was around, do we want to have an appointee on groups that we fund? And similar to Councillor Moore, and I think most of those groups, we either directly fund a project, or we fund them through CVRD. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that applies because they all receive Courtenay taxpayer funding in one way or another.
Mhm. And I think there was a comment about having, if it's significant, have them do a delegation and update all the council at once. Ms. Saunders.
Thank you through the mayor to council. I just thought it might be helpful to offer which committees have staff assigned to them for information if it's not clear. But I wonder, Ms. Proton, can you go back to the list? Thank you so much. So we do have staff assigned to the Community Substance Use Strategy Committee, the Coalition to End Homelessness, the Comox Valley Early Years Collaborative through our Early Years Coordinator. The one I'm not sure of, to be honest, is the Social Planning Society, whether staff in development services, just thinking about Ms. Gothard, if she's assigned to that, or if we attend on an as-needed basis.
Or on an
As-needed basis.
as
Okay.
needed basis, yeah.
Great. And we do have funding relationships in place for the substance use strategy. We do not have funding relationships in place between the city and the other organizations. We did recently provide a one-time grant to the Comox Valley Food Policy Council, but it wasn't an ongoing operating grant. Where staff are assigned, it either comes at, of course, council could direct it, but typically it's because the work of the committee directly aligns with strategic priorities of council. So staff have been directed to do work that directly aligns with that committee. And so our attendance there is generally quite specific or generally aligned with work that we've already been designated to do, as opposed to being present at a committee just for information sharing or receiving. And so staff's time at those committees, our recommendation, guidance, or practice is really that it's tied to a work plan that's approved by council, because it's work that we need to get done and we want to work with committees on. Usually we have one designated staff representative, and then if other staff need to be invited for particular pieces of work, then that staff representative will assist in inviting other staff members or work groups to work on different priorities. So hopefully that's helpful in just providing a bit more context.
City manager attends the DCBIA.
Yeah, DC, yeah. I'm not sure if you caught that. But and I think, like, for me, when I look at this, what would be like super helpful if this was a table that had basically columns that said staff, and then, you know, just so that when you're looking at it, it's really clear, and then you can have, you know, the last name or the section of the city, whatever department it's coming from, or the counselor or that's attending as well. So and I'm just thinking, like, when this comes back to either to us or when it comes back to the next council, having that really articulated. Councillor Jolicoeur, I was just gonna say your light's still on. I don't see any lights on right now, but I don't want to rush us through just in case there's any pontificating happening. Oh, yeah.
Do you want to set a limit on the number of discretionary appointments, or are you fine having that be fluid?
It sounded like fluid was good. Like being as restrictive as possible, I think, but not giving a hard number. You're good? Okay, so that's out.
At this point, it says that for members to be appointed, the external organization would have to make a request at least once per council term. Does that meet
Mhm. And we talked about getting that terms of reference, and maybe that just again becomes a policy that, you know, in January of an election year, those letters go out requesting those terms of reference for the next council, so that organizations have a period of time to respond before the election. Oh, yeah, Mr. Garbutt.
So I'm just kind of following along, and we need to, the administrative, so there's going to be a balance, the administrative burden and requirements for these organizations to have council representation. We also, just looking at the list of them, you know, asking them to write a letter and provide terms of reference. I just want to acknowledge that that might be a challenge for some of them, but I really appreciate council's direction on this, because this takes a lot of time, takes a lot of councilors' time, and because we have these cross appointments or staff inclusion, like there's a lot of time goes into these things. So I just I would just let council know that there might be some challenge with the response. And then if they're not in the response, are they out, or does the administrative, our legislative services department then need to hound them? Apologies for a harsh word, but you know, but stay focused, because many of these committees are also important to council. So just offer
Absolutely.
that.
Councilor McCollum.
Yeah, I was just gonna point out too that, I mean, bringing in the requirement for a formal request means that should an organization not do this in time for the initial strategic planning, that anything can be added after the fact. And just like if a new committee comes around that would really like some council representation, if they don't exist at the beginning of council term, they certainly don't have to wait until the next year. So I would point out the same, that, you know, and I mean, there's a lot of transition of people participating, that if a letter is missed and it's noted that they would like council representation, it's as simple as sending a letter to council and we could get someone appointed. So I imagine that there probably will be a bit of additions that are out of cycle, and I think that that's totally manageable. And yeah, and then it serves as a way of rebalancing committees if some things have changed since the beginning of the council term.
Yeah, and one thing that jumps into mind for me, besides it, you know, some of the things that might be sporadic, is there's ad hoc things, there's task forces. If I look at the last 2 terms, where there might not even be a formal terms of reference. I think about the shelter task force or something like that, where it's just called, and there's obviously a very focused thing, but there's not necessarily a lot of the stuff that like a terms of reference or anything like that that gives it necessarily clarity in this context. So and again, going back to that accessibility, where anybody can contact any member of council at any time if they have a concern or if they have a need, and then it can be addressed at that point as well. All right, are we done talking? All right, I think it's been a great conversation. I mean, it's tough, and I know a lot council members are really wanting to make sure that we are accessible and really committed to our community, and I think it's been a great conversation to see how we can do that more effectively. So I really appreciate it. So with everything that's on the screen right now, are we just looking, and if there's no changes, somebody to move this? Oh, Councillor Cole Hamilton.
I'm happy to second. Now it's been moved. I just want to take a moment just to say thanks to Adriana, not only for preparing this, but today you've had to do all the jobs. Like you're like keeping us organized, revising things, answering. It's been a lot on the go. So just thank you. Thank you very much.
Very much appreciated trying to herd these cats. It's been a great evening. With that being said, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion on the screen, and any opposed, and motion carries. Thank you. Really appreciate this coming to council.
Question.
Yeah.
Because that's not attached to a recommendation, but it's in the staff report, and I did want to just speak to it because obviously there's lots of effort that have gone into it. It's the entire page, the staff report, page 7 and 8, around the timeline for the work to be done. And you've listed 4 committees for new terms of reference to be created. And I'm wondering, I just want to make sure that we haven't lost the thread. The OCP implementation committee is not listed there. However, you've listed finance, parks and rec, heritage, art and culture. So that's not an exhaustive list that will be established at the new term, the new council.
That's right. The list there, I don't have it on my screen, but I believe that those are things that we have had direction in some way to review the terms of reference, or in the cultural strategic plan. It says we should consider having this kind of committee. So that does not limit the future council at all. Future council can decide it doesn't want to do any of those, but it wants to have, I don't know, an estuary committee or something. Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
thanks.
Donut committee, pizza committees, all of the committees.
Oh.
These are teasers to keep us coming back, I think. But all right, I'll call the, I already called the question. I just have to adjourn the meeting. No, not yet.
There was, sorry, if I can get it to go to the next screen. We just have one more recommendation, which is direction to staff to bring those topics back to the new council once these policies are complete.
Yes. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And now adjourn. Okay, we're gonna adjourn. Thanks, everybody.